Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is What's Hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
So Tom got summoned for jury duty next week, and he's never had to do it before. Have either of you ever had to?
I've been summoned, but is it like state, local?
It's like Hennepin
city?
County, like in the
Okay,
like in
okay.
Minneapolis. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been summoned. As a student, I kept getting summoned, and so I would submit that like I was a student and I couldn't go because of,
How
like I
many
didn't want to
times
miss
have you been
class.
summoned?
I think 3.
That's
But
a lot.
I know. Well, so I got summoned 3 times in Arizona, and I was a student, and so I kept deferring because I was like, I don't want to skip class. Like I used that
Right.
as the excuse. Don't want to skip class. And then the last time, they must have known I graduated, so I didn't defer, and I went and sat in a room, and then they settled, whatever. So they just dismissed us all. We didn't need to go in. And then I got summoned once in Tacoma, Washington, where I had to go back 2 days because I went in the one day and they pulled people in or whatever, and then they had to go to the second day to get a jury. So I was there for like a day and a half. But they never got to my group to like actually go in and get interviewed to be a part of. They selected the jury before they got to my group. I've always thought it'd be interesting to be part of a jury, but then I talked to people who are like on juries, and I watch a lot of crime documentaries, so I feel like I shouldn't be eligible to be on a jury because like, not that makes me an expert, but I feel like that jades my perception
I can
of
see that.
jury.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've never even been summoned. Ever.
crazy.
Not even once in my whole life. And
It's funny how you never have been, and Ashley has been so many times.
yeah,
And
so
I
many
thought that was
times.
How does that
normal.
work?
I thought it was
I've only
normal to be
been
summoned that much.
once.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife got a summons earlier this year, but she was like, no, it's the start of the school year. Like, so she got it deferred for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years or something. She'll come around again.
Nice.
But like, I still have never been summoned. It's fascinating. I honestly feel like it would be interesting to be in a jury too. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think
just
just
see
like
the whole process.
right, because like I mean, I hope to never be on the side of the table where like I'm have been guilty of a crime or something. So like I can't
Right.
imagine myself experiencing like the court and just how that whole thing works and like a different like I just can't imagine what it's actually like in a courtroom.
Yeah. I don't know. It'd be kind of fascinating. Now, obviously, you could like be super unlucky and get like, put on the super long, like you have to be sequestered for like
Yeah.
6 months kind of trial and be like, well, that was a terrible life experience, but I don't know.
I think it depends on the trial. I mean, I think sometimes
Yeah.
things would be interesting and it would captivate your attention. Still would
But
suck
being
to be
stuck in a
sequestered.
hotel, yeah.
Yeah. But I think at least if it was like an interesting you know what I mean? Like an interesting
Yeah.
trial would make it a little bit. I'm intrigued to hear how it goes, Liz, for him. Like if he gets selected,
Yeah. I'll let you
maybe
know.
you'll be husbandless for a few months.
I doubt he'll get selected. We'll see if he even has to go in. You have to like call the night before. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, I went in. I had to go in once. It was when I was working at Power Objects, and like I just sat there and like I was in the room where they questioned the potential jury members, but I wasn't questioned, and then they picked their people and like sent us home. So
Yeah.
it was kind of boring. I don't know.
I read a book. I got through
I
like
I brought my laptop and kept working because like they pay you, but they pay you like $20 a day or something. So like
you can also like defer the
Yeah.
payment and then like because your work has to like
yeah.
subtract and
Yeah.
stuff. So I think I
still
just
got
deferred.
yeah.
I think I deferred the payment. Was like cool. Just like give it to they gave it to some charity or something.
Yeah.
So it's like sweet, do that.
Yeah, they send you like a bus pass. Like you're gonna like they provide one day of like free public transportation, but just
Well, it's
one.
it's still good though. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's nice that they try to make it easy.
Mhm.
Yeah, if buses came out this far. But yeah.
You drive into the bus.
Drive to the bus stop and take the bus. Yeah.
It's probably better than trying to park downtown. But
Oh, do you think parking? I don't think parking downtown's that hard these days. No one's down there. No one's
but it's
going to
pricey.
work.
You gotta pay
It's
money for it.
expensive. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway,
That is true.
well, maybe someday all of us will serve on an actual jury.
But you know what's going to happen is because we talked about this, like our phones are going to hear like, oh, they're talking about jury duty. Let's like put this into a Google algorithm and then like send it to the state and then like they'll all get selected. So I bet you anything, because you know, our phones listen to us.
I mean, yes.
So I bet we're all going to get jury summons in the next couple weeks or months.
We'll
I
put
bet
this to the
that we
test and
don't.
report back.
Oh no, we're not going to. I'm just saying, I think it would be really funny if like
It would be very ironic. I would be concerned that it was not like a neutral like random selection.
right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Yeah. Okay, on to our actual topic today, which unfortunately is not jury duty. But our actual topic today is training, and specifically comparing training in person versus training virtually. Talking about some of the challenges, pros and cons of each, and how to do each of them maybe a little bit more effectively. So with that, I just want to lead in by saying virtual training is harder than in-person training. I'm just going to drop that as a landmine and then back away slowly. Liz or Ashley, would either of you like to begin with your thoughts on one of the two methods of training?
So I'll talk about like one of the ways I think virtual is harder. And this is like actually a conversation I was just having with my in-laws last night. And we were talking about like how to tell if the learners, the audience, the participants are engaged in a virtual format versus an in-person format. I think when it's in person, like it's so much easier to pick up on like the nonverbal cues and the body language, or if there's eye contact. And we were talking about like, you know, if someone's looking down, taking notes on paper or their laptop in an in-person meeting, like you can tell that they're engaged and they're just taking notes, but like that may be perceived as like disengagement on a virtual meeting. And so talking about like, what is engagement virtually and how do you track that? And then like talking about the different tools that the different like virtual training software has, like WebEx and GoToTraining, that kind of like monitor engagement, and if those are helpful, accurate, do you use them, are they too big brother, like things like that.
I don't think I've ever even tried to use those.
Really?
I mean, like I've seen them on the GoTo tool where it's like if somebody's engaged or not.
Yeah.
But again, I assume that it's only tracking like, is the window active? And to
It
your point,
is.
if they're taking notes, like, okay, I'm over here in OneNote and I'm taking notes on what I'm hearing, then I assume it's going to show as they're not engaged, which is obviously not the case.
Yeah, I think it's either if it's active or if it's like up, like in the front. And so, but like, if you had like multiple monitors, like that wouldn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit the nail just like right on the head, and we could end it there, Liz, right? Is that like the biggest difference I would say between the two, the biggest difference, there's a lot of differences, is that you can measure and look at that engagement so much differently. So I've used Adobe Connect in the past for, and they track the engagement. I think they were one of the first ones to do it. This was
Yeah.
like 6 or
I
7
have
years
not
ago.
heard of that tool in a long time. I actually forgot about it and didn't
Yeah,
put it on my list.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, because I don't know if it's still around, but loved it back in the day. You could break people out. You could, I mean, I know that like because of the pandemic, a lot of these other tools have like added breakouts and whiteboards and things like that. But it was like the first of the kind, I would say Adobe Connect was. And the way that I would use that engagement as like if I saw somebody like going down, I would ask them a question.
Mhm.
You know, like I wouldn't necessarily like say, oh, hey, I see that you're not paying attention, but I'd ask them a question. And if they like were like, oh no, can you repeat that? I didn't hear it. You know, like you can kind of tell like if people, but if you start calling people out, I feel like they're going to
And you
start to pay
call them
attention.
out specifically. It's not like a broad
Mhm.
question to the entire group.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like doing that, but I also, so depending on the type of training, so if I was doing like a new hire training and they needed to, you know, like learn the material, if I could see or feel that somebody wasn't paying attention, I'd be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to switch it over to your screen now and you're going to show us what we just walked through to like see it in practice. And so I became known as like the scary person to train with, because people are like, oh my God, she's going to make you share your screen at some point and then do what she did. You know what I mean? So you had to pay attention. Otherwise, it kind of looked like a fool in front of everyone else.
That's actually kind
Yeah.
of a handy reputation to get if you're doing more virtual training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that's the struggle that I've had too, is like trying to understand, like, are people actually listening? Are they paying attention? And I've had mixed experiences with that. Like years and years ago, I did I'll put air quotes around my training on how to use a sales module. This was forever ago. And I spent 2 hours on the phone, on a screen share, just talking to, like, I think we did 8 different groups of people. So I spent 4 days that week, 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, just like repeating the same content to them. And in all 8 of those sessions, I don't think that a single person ever spoke once other than me. And I got to the end of that week and my throat hurt from talking too much. And I was just like, that was terrible. And I don't imagine anybody learned anything because I don't actually think they were paying any attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think that making
Yeah.
your training interactive virtually, like there's got to be some sort of place for them to take over. Maybe it's share screen, maybe it's not. Maybe like you just say, let's jump on a whiteboard and like, what do you think this means? Or what do you think comes next? Like I always try to, if it's going to be more than an hour, try to do something interactive. I try to keep all my meetings to 45 minutes, all of my training sessions with salespeople, because I only work with salespeople right now. But after I know I've lost them after, I think I mentioned this on our last training topic podcast, was I know I lose them after 25 minutes. If I even get that far, like that's probably the average. So I try, to break it up into 45-minute increments.
So I love whiteboarding in person, but I have not been able to like effectively replicate that in a virtual format. Like, what do you guys use for whiteboarding virtually, and like how do you incorporate it in?
So again, going back to Adobe Connect, we did it a lot there.
Okay.
And then I know Teams has a whiteboard and I'm starting to use it a little bit. I'm trying it like on just my internal Teams one.
And are you using like a stylus and like a touch screen, or like how are you actually, because that's the thing, like it's just not like writing,
Right. Yeah. So that's like the struggle. Like in Adobe Connect, you could like, because I had a Surface.
Yeah.
So it was different. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I think that would make a difference. I feel like I haven't really used whiteboards that much, and maybe that's a good strategy that I should be leveraging in virtual trainings to try to get people to use the whiteboard. But again, like writing while drawing with your mouse is not really, like, that doesn't really work that well.
No, it's not good.
I would say I also use whiteboarding kind of as a broad term because we use Miro a lot internally. So sometimes I'll pull up a Miro board and like share the link with everybody, and we'll go in there and play some stickies and boxes.
That makes more sense to me. Or like if you're doing, I don't know what it's called, but like basically where you write on stickies and then you put them in groups on the wall, like that sort of like interaction, I could see like working in Miro pretty well. Yeah.
It's kind of like a design thinking exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think would work a lot better. There's another tool that's similar to that. I can't remember what it's called. It starts with a K. If I think of it, we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
I like polls and like kind of quizzes, like games or like interactive things. So like I know you guys have seen me use Poll Everywhere. Like, and I think that's a good way to get engagement. I know like some of the tools like Go to Training, I think has polls, or like they have quizzes or polls built in. And then I like Kahoot for like games. And so I think that can help. I think that the thing with virtual training is that you have to be more intentional, and you have to I think it takes more time to like build those things, incorporate them in. Because like if I'm training in person in front of people, like I can just ask a question, get a raise of hands, and then maybe have a conversation about it. But you have to be way more intentional about, I want this poll here in my agenda or my slide deck. And just kind of think of it. I think of it like more thinking of it ahead of time than like on the spot.
Yeah, I would
say my perspective.
I would say I do more like design thinking, right? Like the content I think takes the same regardless if it's in person, if it's virtual. I mean, I put the same amount of effort into like what I'm going to present content wise, but like you can tell in person, like, oh, this is getting boring. Like I can see on people's faces. So let me switch gears really quick. And
you can adapt faster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you can't do that because if you didn't prep that poll question using that tool ahead of time, you can't just like add it in on the spot.
Yeah. So I mean, if you get like to a place like virtually, if you did prepare that kind of stuff and you're like feeling like you're losing people, you can say, hey, let me just throw this in, but you have to have it ready.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. You have to be a lot more kind of planful and intentional when you're doing virtual training. I like that example. Like, oh, I just thought of this question that I'd like to ask everybody and get a show of hands. Well, that's easy to do in a room because you just get the show of hands and count them or see who didn't raise their hands. But if you're in the middle of a virtual training, you'll be like, everybody just hold on a second while I create this poll real fast because I want to make sure that I actually get answers from everyone. And if you just ask the question, then you're going to get like the two people who are
You're
willing
gonna
to
get
speak
crickets.
to answer, and they'll be like, well, maybe, yeah, no, I agree with that. And then everybody else is just nothing. Yeah, that could be tricky.
Why do you think people are more hesitant to speak up and participate in a virtual format? Like, do you think it is because they're not paying attention, or do you think there's something else there? Like they are, and it's just the format of the training that it's virtual that they're. I just feel like there's less participation in general, no matter how much engagement or like how hard you try to get them to speak up and participate.
You know what's funny is I think it's a psychological thing where they're like hidden. You know what I mean? Like they're hidden behind something. So like if I don't answer, they're not just going to stare at me until I actually do say something. Because I know in
It's
like
less
a room,
awkward for them.
yeah, well, because like in
Yeah.
a room, like if you're in person and you ask a question and nobody answers, you can just sit there and be like, and stare at everybody like, all right, I'm
And
waiting for
someone will
somebody to
say
answer.
something because they hate that.
Yeah, but like when
yeah.
you're virtual, everyone's just like, okay, we're just gonna sit here, and like you're kind of hidden behind that screen. So I think some of it's psychological, but I also think that because they can't see each other, like I know like in a room they'll like look around and they'll, you know, like see if somebody else has an idea, or they'll play off each other based on, you know what I mean? And I think virtually it's just that personal connection is gone.
Do you think requiring videos to be on helps, or should that be a requirement?
I actually in trainings don't like anybody but the presenter to have their video on because I think it's distracting to the other person, the other people.
But I wonder if it would help with like you're less hidden, or you can like see other people, so are you more likely to speak up?
Yeah, I would say there's probably, but like I mean that's my personal thing is I think that only the person talking should have their camera on. But I could see benefits to both ways.
See, now, if I'm the only person, if I'm presenting and I'm also the only one with my camera on, then it makes me personally feel like more self-conscious and kind of uncomfortable because then I'm like, well, you can all see me, but I can't see any of you. And that's a little bit weird. So like the last time that I did a virtual training, I asked at the beginning, I was like, we can do this one of two ways. We can either all go cameras or we can none of us go cameras.
Ooh,
And
I like that.
They chose none of us. So I was like, great, then I don't have to worry about turning on my camera.
I don't know about you, but I love staring at myself when I have my camera on. You just look at yourself
Well,
every time. I'm just kidding.
I don't have as much hair to move around, so.
Oh, all right, Marilyn, here we go.
One of the other things though,
As you play with your hair.
It fell, Liz, it fell.
So one of the things that I did in my last virtual training that I actually really liked was when we did breaks. So I would do like a little screen share of like a notepad of like, this is the time that we're coming back. And then I told everybody, when you come back, raise your hand, because we were in teams. Because what I didn't want to do is you can't like, okay, I'm back now. Is everybody here?
No, it doesn't work.
If you're not here, say something. Oh, wait, you're not here, right? So I was like, well, how can I force them to take an action to identify that they are in fact back again? So I was like, when you come back, put your hand up, and then I can see how many people have come back. And then I'm like, great, we have enough. Those two laggards will catch up whenever they catch up. You can all put your hands down and we'll continue. But I felt like, I don't know, I couldn't think of another way to make sure that they'd all actually come back from getting coffee or whatever.
Putting the end time of the break is super important regardless of the format. So like if it's in person, I would always write it on the whiteboard. If it's virtual, I just like pull up a countdown timer on the internet and put in 5-10 minutes, whatever. And when that gets down to 0, that's when people should be back.
Yeah, I love doing a countdown virtually because they can like see it. And they're like, oh, I still have like 3 minutes. I can go.
It also holds like you accountable too, because it's like, oh, you might be taking longer than you think on your break.
Is the countdown better than picking a time?
I think they're both equally.
They're equal.
Yeah, but I think it just depends on
The
visually.
time would be more difficult, like across time zones.
I guess that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I didn't even think of that. That's a good point.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to be like, oh, you're East Coast, West Coast, like I'm doing, like I just wouldn't want to like try to convert it or like have that be in the mix. So I think the countdown timer is just a straight, like you have 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, end of story, no matter where you're at around the world.
That's fair. I don't know. I tried to stick, like bottom of the hour, top of the hour.
I'm not that
I'm-
precise. with
I
my
was gonna say
training.
I'm impressed that your content always has a nice breaking point at the top.
I am
bottom of the
shocked
hour.
you're that prepared with your content, Marilyn, that
No,
happened.
really what it means is that I'm more flexible with the length of the break.
Oh,
So instead of being like, well, it's 10 minutes and I've ended exactly at 1:20, and so now we'll come back at 1:30, but like, well, it's 1:17 and I've ended my content. We'll just come back at the bottom of the hour. Just come back at 1:30. So now instead of a 10-minute break, you've gotten a, 13, 15, whatever minute break. I just extend the break.
that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
I'm nice like
Way
that.
to
For you.
defend yourself, Marilyn. Speaking of juries and trials.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the defense. What other guidance do we have? Anybody?
Liz, you can go first if you have anything.
I mean, I think we could talk about we want to talk about different tools for virtual training, like the different software that's out there and what we like or dislike about them.
Yeah, I think that's
Like,
probably a
so
good.
I've used Adobe Connect. I forgot about that. So thanks, Ashley. That was a really long time ago. So it's definitely not fresh in my memory. I've used like GoToTraining, which is a variation of GoToMeeting or like GoToWebinar, WebEx, Zoom, and obviously Teams. I think GoToTraining and WebEx have more of the like metrics of like, are people paying attention or not? And some things more baked in for engagement. I like Zoom breakout teams probably the best, but like what have you guys used or like what are your preferences?
See, I've only used Teams, so my experience is pretty limited, and
So
I
I
don't even use
like
breakout rooms.
team breakout rooms and teams are so difficult though because you can't bring yourself back and you can't like someone has to stay in the main team to be able to bring people back. So like as the trainer, you send them off into your teams and like in person or in Zoom, I would want to go and like check on them, right? Or I want to give them the ability to come back and ask like the people in the main room a question, which they can't do. And so I cannot, like I have not figured out how to use breakout rooms and teams effectively, like with the given functionality, because I think those are such huge limitations and like they don't replicate kind of the in-person group work idea.
Yeah, that was one of the things I liked about Adobe Connect. I also think that anything you created in the breakout room, you could then bring back with you into the main room, if I'm remembering correctly. So if you did like a whiteboard or if you did a document, I mean, there were so many options of things to create inside of Adobe Connect for interaction. You could then bring all of that back into the main room, or you could leave it if you wanted to. So, I mean,
cool.
back in the day, I have no idea if it's even still around or like what would be like the same as Adobe Connect, but I would say that's probably the most sophisticated tool that I've used for training. Now it's really just Teams because that's what we have internally. But I've used WebEx before, and Zoom, obviously, but yeah, now it's pretty much just Teams.
Yeah. From an accessories tools perspective, I like the Kahoot game platform. I think that's a good one. I do like the poll anywhere. I haven't actually created the polls, but I have watched you use the polls effectively, so I can speak to the effectiveness of that.
They're pretty easy to set up and use and embed into PowerPoint, and it's free. So
that's always nice.
I don't know.
The free version of Kahoot is not very good though. Like you really kind of need to have the paid for version. Like you can't do much with the free version.
I think you have a limit too on how many you can do on the free. So.
Yeah, and it's just like you don't get nearly as many options for like style of questions. It's really basic.
I've used Poly before, like in Teams. I know that's like an add-on into Teams to do polls. So I've like thrown one of those into the chat. But again, it like the free version, you only get so many responses for free. So you can only do so many polls in your 1 hour training because you can only have so many responses within like a 24-hour experience or 24-hour time frame. So again, if you pay for it, then you get more responses. So
Yeah. Any other tool suggestions?
No.
I would say you just have to find like what works with the personality of your team that you're working with. Because I know Teams was really difficult for like my end users. It was like more difficult for them to sometimes figure out how to use Teams and navigate Teams than Dynamics is what we were training on. So I think that, like sometimes you do need to hold a training or some sort of conversation about the platform that you're using so that people don't feel like there's a barrier to join the training.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably a good point too. Don't have to think about that in person. Walk into this room.
No, in person has a completely different things that you need to think about from like a setup perspective. Like you have to make sure like you can project and you have the right adapters. We had that issue at Summit with Merlin's Surface. So, but you should think about the layout of the room, and like classroom style is usually not the best for like facilitating discussions. Like how do you want your room set up from a seating perspective? So like there's a whole other set of things that you need to think about from like a prep perspective if you're in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Audio, like can they hear you? Yeah.
Well, and I always think of like the logistics. So like if you have food, where's the food going to go? Like, is it going to be distracting? Where's the bathroom? Is it convenient for everybody to get to? I mean, like
the internet.
Oh
the
my
internet
gosh,
working.
the internet.
Do you know what the Wi-Fi is called, and do you have the password?
Yeah, so I think that there's just like more logistical things that are like that take place in in-person trainings.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you had to pick one, like you can only do virtual or in-person training for the rest of your life, what would you pick? Like what's your favorite or your preference?
In person.
In person for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Isn't it crazy? Because we're moving to a virtual world.
I don't like doing it. Like virtual training to me is so less fulfilling than in-person training. I think it's because you just, no matter how hard you try, that engagement level is just does not feel the same.
When I like to see the light bulb go off with people, like I like to have that conversation of like, they can say, this is where I'm having a problem. This is the process issue I have. And then that light bulb moment and you like see it, like that to me is like, that's the reason I do what I do. And you don't, like you said, you don't get that over.
Yeah, because it feels good. Like it's exciting as a trainer to see, especially if they've been struggling or confused to see that thing click, that light bulb moment. I also just like the ability to adapt. Like I hate that I can't adapt on the fly. I can't be as flexible in a virtual training format.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Yep. And I don't like the fact that I can't just like walk over and stand behind somebody and be like, okay, show me the problem that you're having. Because if they're having that problem, and you're like, oh, well, you can share your screen. And then they're like, well, where's the I can't get the share button. I'm sharing the wrong.
Well, and it's for the whole group. Like the whole group doesn't need to be part of that. Like that should be a breakout room. Like that should be a one-on-one conversation, not presenting to the whole group conversation, because it's can be embarrassing for that person that needs help too. Like who wants to be that person that's stuck that has to like show to the whole group that you're stuck and you're not the one not like following along.
And then what if you have embarrassment of like not being able to know how to share? Like some people are like, oh, it's just a button at the top, and like that pressure for like people who are not technology driven or understand. So yeah, I could see that being really difficult. And like I would leave if I was that person and just be like, never mind.
Right.
Yeah.
I also think it's easier for people to leave. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Last thoughts? Okay. Then that's training. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.